Hey guys, today we are talking about maybe one of the most divisive issues in today's culture, politics. So come along with us. Hopefully you enjoy it. All right, man. Well, hopefully we don't lose half of our viewership here. So.
Yeah, well, I don't know what the thumbnail is going to look like for this one, but
maybe some knives and some blood or something.
We'll see what happens here. We'll try to be nice.
Yeah. So one thing that I know that it's a big issue nowadays that we, it seems like everything is political. And, as we get into this conversation, I think there's a reason for it, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I kind of wanted to get your view on where you kind of sit in politics and kind of what you think today looks like in the political landscape.
Yeah, well, obviously this is a kind of a big rabbit hole to go down here. But so first of all, whenever we, in my job in law enforcement and working at Tombstone Gun Range and kind of being in the public eye a little bit and kind of in our line of work, people are pretty interested a lot in what you believe. And they're always asking our opinions about all kinds of things because whether we're experts in marriage, obviously, like on the last episode.
Absolutely.
Or
the world's
firearms.
Experts. Yeah.
whatever the case is, people are interested to get your opinion about things. And politics is no different. We see it, in entertainment, on the internet, YouTube, whatever. Everybody wants to hear what somebody's got to say politically. And it's, for the most part, a lot of it is entertainment value, but a lot of it is also rooted in at their core. I believe people are frustrated. They're frustrated at what they see on TV, in the news about politics. And politics is just so wild and crazy now that you never know really what to believe or who to believe. And it's kind of just a media circus all the time. And it's just normal people living in Southern Illinois. That's not kind of our lives. We deal on a much smaller scale. We deal with kind of the same issues that affect us, but it's kind of it's a different issue because it affects real life people, real families, and we want to see some type of connection there. So people get frustrated real quick with the show of it all. And whether it's a news channel or any type of media outlet, it's always entertainment. And it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's ABC News or Fox News or CNN, they're all in the entertainment business. And as we get to talking here about kind of our beliefs and stuff, I will not shy away. I'll try and describe my political leanings here without getting into like 50 different issues. But I definitely lean towards being conservative, and I try to be reasonable about that, especially when it comes to our conversations. And I think my first rule with all this, the politics, is don't get into this with your family. Do not. And I've got family. I've got all kinds of family that are very liberal, and I love them like crazy. We never talk about politics. And I think if you want to ruin a relationship with a family member as fast as you possibly can, start telling them why they're wrong in their political beliefs.
Yeah.
And it might be it. It might be the last time you ever talk to them, and it's just not worth it. That little part of your brain about how you believe politically compared to your entire relationship with your family over the years or whatever, it's not worth it. And you can have a relationship with your family without ever talking about politics, and everything will be A-okay. I promise. So that'd be my first rule, is just, if you know it's going to be a problem, then don't talk about it. Talk about football or basketball or whatever. Just don't. It's probably not worth it. Now, when we get on here on the old interwebs and talk about our political beliefs, there's a lot of people out there watching that are curious and want to hear that. And I think this is a good format. I think this is a good forum to get into our beliefs, and it's not going to be a debate show, but I think it's leaves room for sanity in your relationships at home or with your family.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. I think that one of the biggest divisive things that we've seen, especially in the last like 3-4 years, is that we've seen families torn apart over whether it was COVID or, the riots that happened in 2020 or just the political landscape of, it just seems like the pendulum, as far as the swinging of the pendulum, is just, it seems like it's more violently moving back and forth than it ever has.
Who would have ever thought that entire families could have been destroyed over trying to figure out whether or not a mask works?
Yeah. Yep.
Holy cow.
Yep.
Like, this has really gotten serious in a hurry. And you see how quickly just people tend to, it's almost just like you're letting the dogs loose on each other and you don't really realize what's going on and the damage that can happen. And so you got to pay attention. You got to be self-aware a little bit about the context of what you're talking about these things with and who your audience is and what you're trying to accomplish. If you get invited to some college to do a debate and everybody wants to, yell and scream, and that's a good forum for that.
Yeah.
But resist the urge to prove to everybody in your family and prove to all your friends that you're right and they're wrong. You got to be delicate with that and just be aware of how quickly that can go bad.
Yes. And I have a lot of friends that I would say they definitely are on the other side of the spectrum. I'm definitely in the same camp as you in the conservative side. I wouldn't classify myself as a Republican. I don't really attribute myself to any political party because I honestly, I'm one of those people that's frustrated with what's going on because it seems like everything's moving in one direction and all we have in Washington is a bunch of people that are enriching themselves that want to just, one moves the football faster than the other, it seems like. Mm-hmm. And I think that one political party probably has policies that a lot of people don't agree with, and when they see those policies and they go to the other one, and the other one is just inept. They don't know what to do. Yeah. Or they have maybe what we would consider good policies and don't enact them and don't stand behind them. They kind of fold over. Everybody's like, well, these guys aren't doing anything, so it's just this pendulum that moves back and forth, and it's just it's detrimental to the country because we want those people to be representative of us, not to be in this club, this elite club in Washington, D.C., where they're all going and rubbing shoulders together. And then when they get, like you said, the show, they get on the floor, all of a sudden they're angry, brutal enemies. And then they all go out to dinner afterwards because that happens.
Yep. So one of my number one rules for me when it comes to politics is be open-minded. So I have very strong beliefs politically on how I think about things, but there's some things that nobody's ever going to change my mind on, but I am willing to sit and listen to you. Mm-hmm. If you did want to have a conversation with me about it, I'll listen to you all day long. Some people in certain parties really shy away from the other party because it's like there's a line in the sand. We're enemies. We can't be in the same room together. I can't be near you because you're this type of person. And I think that's a little shallow, and you have to be open-minded. You have to be willing to listen regardless of what your belief is. And it doesn't mean we're going to be changing a whole lot of minds, like I said, but I try to be well-rounded as possible. And there's a lot of people that spend a lot of time researching stuff all over the place, all different sides. But you can't just close yourself off and paint yourself into a corner so you're just one-sided. When it comes to, do I watch Fox News? Yep, sure do. Do I watch ABC nightly news almost every night at 5:30? Yep, sure do. Do I tend to lean towards one of those more than the other? Yeah, I do. But I'm man enough to where I can sit there and watch ABC nightly news with David Muir and not go cry in a corner or have to go to a safe room after I've spent 30 minutes watching ABC News.
Yeah.
Big deal. ABC News is a fairly liberal news channel. So what? They got news. I want to see what's going on.
Yep.
And I'm honest enough, intellectually honest enough to where I can sit and listen to that. I'll listen to Stephen Colbert or, Bill Maher or whoever. I can sit and listen to them for 30 minutes and listen to what they have to say. They might not change my mind, but you have to be open enough to just be able to listen to somebody without freaking out.
Yeah.
Can we just set a baseline of let's have a conversation if we want to, and everybody's going to be mentally strong enough to understand the big picture of these are just ideas we're floating around out here, and let's just talk about them if we want to for a little bit without having a meltdown just because it's the other side.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of crazy for me to say, but I have found myself in the last couple of years agreeing with Bill Maher more than I ever thought I would in a lot of ways. There's a lot of things that he's talked about where I'm like, that makes a lot of sense, because he's thinking critically and he's trying to put aside his own personal bent to pursue truth. Not always, but I've seen, more than probably a dozen occasions in the last couple of years where I'm like, oh, that's actually a very good point. And that's actually, intellectually honest, and he's pursuing the truth, and no matter where that leads him. I think another guy that I've started seeing with the pursuit of truth is probably Joe Rogan with his podcast. He has a lot of different viewpoints on, and he'll have a liberal guy on, then he'll have a super conservative guy on, and he's always asking the questions that kind of lead him to, hey, what is the truth here? And I think that that's probably the most important thing for us to pursue in politics is truth. I think that should reign supreme. So if the truth leads you to a more liberal point of view, if it's the truth, it's the truth. If it leads you to a more conservative view, then that's where we should go, so because the truth is always going to lead back to the ultimate truth, which is God. And you see people, even a guy like Jordan Peterson, who was a liberal college professor a few years ago and got involved in a couple of things in his pursuit of truth, and now he's doing full studies of the Bible, so you see this guy kind of start to pursue truth, and now he's talking about Jesus and all of these things in the Bible, and you see this shift in his outlook and where he's actually tearing up when he's talking about God. And it's like you see this kind of transformation, and I don't know where he's at as far as his his spiritual walk or his faith, but it just feels like he's headed in that direction because he's pursuing truth.
Yeah, and that's the ultimate thing that people are always frustrated with when it comes to politics is you might be watching somebody giving a speech and they're talking about either the things they've done or going to do or what the problems are in the country, and it is 100% complete BS.
Yep.
And I'd say I don't know what percentage of words that coming out of any politician's mouth are complete BS, but it's a high percentage. And it's funny when you talk about like Bill O'Reilly from Fox News years ago, Bill O'Reilly, the reason that guy was so popular when he first started on Fox News is because he was a type of host that you couldn't get away with a BS answer. If a politician or somebody came on his show and he asked him questions like, hey, what's going on, with the southern border? And if a politician gave some answer like, everything's fine or we're doing everything we can, he would not let him off the hook.
Yep.
And he kept digging and kept digging and kept digging. And people felt like finally a sense of relief. Finally, somebody on a news station that didn't let a politician get away with a fluffy BS answer. Why should politicians ever be able to answer somebody with just a general vague answer that just make up to appease you in your question and not answer it?
Yeah.
It drives me absolutely bonkers. I think that's why I can't imagine working like in the White House secretary pool because listening to whether it's a Republican in office or a Democrat and a news person asks a question and you just get the runaround. It's like every single answer is the runaround. And I know I get some things with national security and all that. You can't just give everybody all the details. But, man, we just don't want the runaround all the time. And people get very, very frustrated. I'm very frustrated with the runaround when the obvious true things all of a sudden are said to be not true right to your face. And like, hey, here's this red book, but it's blue. And they tell you it's blue right to your face. And you're like, no, It's not. I'm looking at it, and they say it anyway. And in politics today, the trend is if they just say the non-true thing 100 times or more, somehow it just becomes true, and you have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And that becomes frustrating. So the whole political spectrum is driving people crazy. And like you said, I think more and more people are not identifying as Republicans or Democrats. They're, drawing away from that and just have to make a decision based on no political party, which is very difficult because for both parties, especially in the presidential election, it's almost always the lesser of two evils. Mm-hmm. There's never the great guy. I do think we have to separate ourselves from wanting every candidate to be the perfect person.
Mm-hmm.
And because what happens is you decide to side with your person, and then you try to make them into that perfect person. Well, my guy is so good. It shouldn't really be about the president and their moral stance, really. You're not voting for a person and how good or bad of a person that person is. Because at this point, by the time you get to be running for president, you owe a lot of people a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much money involved. I mean, good grief, you got to have like $1 billion to run for president or something. Yep. What kind of – this is crazy stuff we're talking about. And so politically speaking, I think we have to kind of just decide for the candidate, like what are they going to be able to do. And I hate to be the person that's like, well, I think both candidates are morally just not good people, so I'm not going to vote for anybody. And some people have made that decision, so you pull back, and I don't necessarily think that's a good decision either. You could take a stand and say, well, I'm going to vote for some third-party guy that has zero chance of winning, and so it becomes a mess. It's difficult. There's no easy solution. I don't know if it's ever going to change. It seems like this whole political process is snowballing, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And it's always, no matter who wins the election, the other side is going to say it was stolen.
Yep.
And
or you elected Hitler.
And there's going to be 5 million lawsuits after every election.
Yeah.
It's like, golly. And on a side note, surely, to goodness, there's somebody out there that can come up with a better way for us to vote in 2023, 24, whatever. If you watch an episode of American Idol, on the finale, everybody watches, and they have their candidates, and everybody at home gets out their phone, and they vote for the person. And voting ends at 7 o'clock. And at 7:01, everybody knows who the winner was. And I know electronics can be hacked. There's probably ways that people could infiltrate that system, but look what you already have on your phone. You've got I bet you have an app to your bank that you can check your bank account balance on your phone. That's pretty private information that you have on your phone that you trust that there's a company that can send you that information to only you and nobody else can have it. So with 2-factor, 3-factor authentication, email, phone numbers, there has to be a way to where every American citizen can pick up their phone on whatever the voting day is and say, there's my person, and we have the results. And I would take that in a heartbeat over what we've got now, because there's not really any faith in the system anymore, no matter what side you're on.
Yeah, I think that, when you look at certain states, and we won't get too deep into that, but, you have a state like Florida that was like the 3rd or 4th largest state in the country. Last presidential election, they were done counting votes 4 hours after the polls closed with a massive, they have tons of large cities and large metropolitan areas, tons of all of these things and they were able to get that done. And then you have states that are smaller than that it was like 2 weeks later that we're still counting votes.
As long as there's people in some back room of some stadium somewhere just going through bins of votes, nobody's going to have a lot of confidence.
And that's what I was going to say is, like, the longer that something takes, it's like a sporting event. If there's a controversial call, and it's pretty obvious to the spectators what actually happened, but then the refs are sitting there for 10, 15 minutes mulling this over. You're like, what are they trying to pull? This doesn't seem right. This seems very, very much like, are they trying to rob somebody of something? It just, you get very, very leery and unconfident in what's going on. Yeah. And I think that one of the things that we can do as Christians, if we're talking about where we should stand on political issues, I think that there are a few verses in the Bible specifically that talk about this. Jeremiah is the first one that comes to mind, and it's the verse that talks about be concerned with the welfare of the land that you live in. And the context of that was that the Israelites were captives. They were in Babylon. They weren't in their own country, but God was telling the children of Israel, be concerned with the welfare of the country that you're living in, because that welfare is your welfare. The success of that country is your success. And I think that's a message for the Christians that may be on the sidelines that are like, oh, I don't really want to get involved in politics. It's so messy. It's so just ugly. And I don't really want to, it just makes me feel icky. We have a unique opportunity in this country. We run differently than really any other country on the face of the planet, in that we do have a voice, and that is represented proportionally to each one of our individual states. We all have an equal say that is proportional. And I think it's a beautiful thing that we have the opportunity to actually vote for all of our local leaders, all the way up to the president, the leader of our entire country, our entire nation. And we should not shy away from that. Instead, I think that we should carry our Christian views, our Christian worldview into the political arena. We should not be shying away from voting, but instead we should be saying, how does this politician, this political party, how do they line up with what the Word of God says? And take it on a case-by-case basis. Full disclosure, I voted for both Democrats and Republicans in my lifetime because I saw one that that lined up with my worldview, trying to put it through the prism of the Bible and what God says about what we should be carrying into the world. And so I voted for both parties. And I will continue to do that because I'm not tied to a political party. I am tied to what the Bible says. And I think that if we get that mindset, we can actually have an effect on the changing of the culture and the changing of the direction that we're headed.
Yeah. Full disclosure, I voted for Ross Perot. If you don't know who that was, hit the old Google machine on that. And the whole point of that was he was the outsider.
Yep.
Never involved in politics. They came to the debates just destroying everybody else with truth bombs. Like this guy, he has zero experience in politics and might have been a complete disaster as a president. But I thought, you know what? I'm tired of the same old thing. I'm tired of the same old people talking the same way and just BSing their way through politics. And it was refreshing to hear somebody come along and tell everybody the truth about what's really going on. And so that's kind of, what I think everybody deep down is looking for. Nobody wants to, vote for career politicians. I don't think so. And that should be, there's, 5 million different topics we got. Yeah. We could have 47 episodes here. But you do see the people that seem to be in politics a long time, whether you're in the Senate for 50 years. Like, come on. Like, what is really going on here? You're really looking out for us more than you're looking out for you. And people just sniff that out and can read that. That type of thing. So term limits, those type of things, would probably do a lot of people a lot of good. And, so there's a lot of things that need to be worked on, obviously, but I'm curious for you, and I'll talk about this with me too, but what kind of things kind of drove you to believe a certain way? Was it how you grew up in church, or was it life experiences, or was it job? Are there certain things in your life that helped mold you into a certain political viewpoint?
Absolutely. First off, I would start with faith definitely has an effect on my worldview and my political views. I think that there are a couple of subjects that specifically I would say they're not up for debate with me. One of them would be the life issue. I am very, very much pro-life, and I don't shy away from that. And I think that is definitely a hot button issue with, recent Supreme Court rulings and all of those things. But I definitely stand for life. It's not really up for debate. The other things, obviously, I'm a very big Second Amendment supporter, and I don't shy away from that at all. I think that in the realm of politics, when you have any time that a politician is talking about gun control or anything like that, they're talking about taking the rights of law-abiding citizens away. This is a police officer. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that criminals are going to just, there's a law. There's a law now that I can't have a gun. No, that's not what that means. And I think that some have this altruistic, like they think that they're doing something for the better good, but they don't really understand what they're talking about. They don't really understand the ramification. Most politicians are protected by guys with guns, and we don't have the luxury of paying for private security. Mm-hmm. We don't have the luxury of being that fortunate to hire guys with guns that were probably ex-special forces to protect us. So it's on us. And I do think that anytime you look historically at gun control or anything like that, it is very much has an ulterior motive that has never been good. It's never been a good thing. I was actually doing some research today about this. I won't get too deep into that because we could do a whole 5 episodes on gun control and the history of all of this and why it's bad, but that's definitely a big issue. I think my children, anything that affects my children directly. So a lot of the new stuff with the gender, I call it madness. I think that God created us as men and women and set forth roles and characteristics of males and females that I think that is under assault right now, and it's being propagated in the classrooms with little kids. There's a big hot button issue about that. That's definitely another big issue, but overall, definitely my faith in the belief in natural rights and our ability to have our own destination, our own pursuit of happiness in our own hands is very, very important. I think less government is actually better than more.
Yeah, big time. And that's, I think really, I'm pretty much anti-government, and being a police officer for 30 years, to say things like, anti-government, it almost sounds, as a law enforcement agency, government, yes, local government. But I think all of us we have a desire to be left alone. And it doesn't mean we're trying to cheat the system. It means we don't want to be overburdened and pressed down by people that are telling you what's best for you. Like, hey, this 44-ounce Route 44 from Sonic is no good for you, so we're gonna make it illegal.
Yeah.
Like, well, shouldn't I be able to decide whether I could do that? And so, in the political world, we hear this a lot. Who needs an AR-15? Who needs a big gulp? Who needs these things? And certain people say, well, we really don't think there's a good reason. We don't think you need that, so we're going to try to make it illegal. And the thing is, it's not a bill of needs. It's a bill of rights. There's a lot of things in our lives that you might not need. Let's take, for example, Rosa Parks. She got off work one day and was on the bus and wanted to sit at a certain seat in the bus. And the bus driver said, nope, you got to get up and let a white person sit there. And she's like, no, not happening, not moving. She got arrested. And later on, through that whole court system, they decided that, she can sit anywhere on the bus because it's her right to sit anywhere on the bus as an American. Doesn't matter what color you are, white, black, whatever. You can't discriminate based on that. It was her right. There wasn't, you could say, well, she didn't have a need to sit anywhere on the bus. She was going to get from point A to point B no matter where she was on the bus.
Yeah.
So she didn't need to change seats. There was no need for that. It was her right to do that, or God-given right to be treated equal. And so when you say, well, you don't need this thing or you don't need that, you're missing the point. It has nothing to do with what somebody needs or not. It's about what is it? Is it their right to do that or not? And we've got it written down in the Constitution or in a Bill of Rights. And so, when the good guys, there's so many good guys out there in America when it comes to the Second Amendment that protect their towns, their communities, their families, would never dream of committing a crime ever.
Yeah.
And when we get told that we're the bad guys, very frustrating. Very, very frustrating. And we're actually the superheroes. We're the ones making sure our neighborhoods and communities and our families are safe. That's what we're doing. And so when it comes to kind of what drove my beliefs politically, growing up, didn't really grow up in church like I've talked about. Went to high school. My parents were pretty much opposite politically. My dad was pretty conservative. My mom was pretty liberal. They both voted opposite. They shouldn't have even gone to vote because they canceled each other out every year. But they did, And so, and they never really pushed one way or another about how I should believe or what I should think politically speaking. Just we never had those conversations at all. And then in college, I think the first time, when I voted when I was 18, I have to look back. I was probably 20-something when I voted for president the first time. But you're just a kid. You're 18, 19, 20 years old. Like, what do you know about politics? Nothing. You don't have any real life experience, and you think you do. You think you sit on the internet and look at YouTube videos all day about all these experts, and you go to college and people tell you certain things and you have all these ideas. That's all they are, is ideas. If you haven't lived it, if you haven't had an experience with it, it's just all pretend. You're pretending. That's it. So your experiences, your real life experiences will drive your beliefs. If you've never been carjacked before and nothing bad has ever happened to you before, you probably believe that nothing bad could ever happen to you. Because it's like, well, what could possibly happen? But if you've been sexually assaulted before in some, parking lot leaving work, or you've been carjacked or robbed at a gas station, you know that there's bad guys out there. And it's possible that bad things could happen to you. And those experiences drive your beliefs about whether you think you should be able to carry a gun to protect yourself or not, for example. So the people that have been raped and robbed and home invaded before, their experiences tell them, you know what, it might be a reasonable idea for me to have a gun to protect myself. The people that's never happened to before would probably say, why would you need a gun? Why would you, that's just dumb. Why would you ever need to do something like that? It's because they haven't been there. They haven't lived it. They haven't had those experiences yet. So the older you get, and in my law enforcement career, I started seeing real life things as far as the criminal justice system and how it worked and how it didn't work. And I started to lean probably more conservatively because I really wanted the criminal justice system to be pretty harsh on criminals and not give people third, fourth, fifth chances. And let's put some people in jail if you do a drive-by on a house and shoot up an apartment and almost kill a bunch of people instead of just letting them go. You see how real life works. And so that's what really kind of drove and I'm not saying every cop out there is conservative. I have a ton of cop friends that believe differently politically from me just because they have different life experiences. And we get along. We work great together. Like I didn't say I can't go on a call with you because you're Democrat. Like, this is ridiculous. We're able to put all that beyond us. But I think that my career kind of drove my beliefs politically in a lot of ways. It always seemed like the more conservative politicians supported law enforcement more, supported Second Amendment rights more. I'm not saying always, especially on a local level, like small towns. Democrats were always very pro Second Amendment, very pro hunting. Like, it was completely different than it is today as far as political parties. But on a national level, it kind of seemed like that's where the support was. And, of course, you're going to lean towards a group of people that support you and your beliefs. You're going to gravitate towards that. And so I think that kind of drove some of my political leanings with being in law enforcement, being involved heavily in firearms, having a range, obviously. And then, obviously my Christian beliefs also drove that heavily. And it doesn't mean, like we talked about earlier, that you're trying to find the right, perfect, wholesome person to be the president. I don't know if we're ever going to find that anymore ever again. There are some pretty good candidates out there besides the top two right now.
Yep.
You might be like, yeah, I think these people are pretty decent. But ultimately, it's probably going to be Biden and Trump. If Trump's not in jail, it'll probably be those two. And then what do you decide? You're going to have to let your conscience decide for you. And I would suggest don't, in that situation, probably you're not voting for the character of the person. You're voting on whether or not that person is going to support what you believe in.
Yeah.
Because if you look at everything else that we support, that we buy, you go to the gas station. Let's say you go to the gas station 2 blocks from your house to get gas every morning. Do you know about the person who owns that gas station? They might be a horrible person that owns a strip club and, is abusive to his wife and a lot of other things, but you support him every day by getting gas at his gas station. So are you going to go get gas somewhere else? Are you going to do research on the owner? Are you going to figure out the moral character of every single owner of every business that you buy from? Probably not. Probably not.
Yeah.
So don't make it such a strong point of contention of believing that the person you're voting for has to be the perfect moral person. I don't know, maybe, and I'm open to listen to people to say, maybe it's a horrible thing. Maybe I just don't realize it. Maybe it's a really horrible thing to vote for somebody that's not that good of a person. But I think if they stand for things that you really believe in, big principle, big picture wise, I think you have to lean that way.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think that really what it comes down to is we're all imperfect people. For us to sit, it brings me to mind of the story of the Samaritan woman that's caught, or wasn't a Samaritan woman, but the woman that was caught in an adulterous affair. And the Pharisees bring her, and they're going to stone her, and they're trying to trap Jesus in this moment. And Jesus just calmly says, he writes some stuff on the ground, and then he calmly says, whoever is sinless, you can cast the first stone. And I think that that's something that we forget because we have this kind of self-righteous feeling of, oh, well, I'm better than that person. Well, maybe. You ever committed a sin in your life? You ever missed the mark? Because the word sin is literally an archery. Its root is in a term of archery, which literally means just to miss the mark.
Yeah.
Have you ever missed the mark? Absolutely. Everybody has. Are we all imperfect? Oh, yeah. We are all imperfect. And so for us to pridefully act like we're just better than somebody else because maybe they in the past cheated on their wife or was a philanderer or whatever. No, we don't really have the right to stand up and say that. Now, in the same breath, I would say I do think that character and principles matter. If you can find a candidate that is a very principled person and has a lot of moral character, vote for that person, absolutely. But the reality is sometimes you don't have that choice. And sometimes we actually have to make a choice based off of which person aligns more with my worldview than the other. Yeah. And it ends up being somewhat of a binary choice. It's a lesser of two evils.
And let's be obvious. Let's be truthful here. Joe Biden has no idea what he's doing, and he's not in control of the presidency at all. He's making zero decisions. That's the truth. And I love to hear what somebody has to say to convince me otherwise. Donald Trump is a butthole and likes to make fun of people and doesn't act like a Christian, and he acts like a little kid and is very juvenile, and people can't stand his personality.
Yep.
That's the truth.
Yep.
About both those people. And so you have to get past all that stuff and boil it down to, if you're a Democrat, well, are there Democrats in that administration that are going to help forward what I believe in? Then, yeah, they'll vote for Biden again, because everybody knows that he's not really running the show and that other people are. Fine, whatever. But the part that's frustrating is when people come on TV and say, Joe Biden is totally fine and he does make presidential decisions. Like, that's not happening. No. Or when people get on TV and say Trump is the greatest person ever, and
Cheeto Jesus,
and like, Orange Jesus, Cheeto, whatever. Yep. Like, you know what? Let's just be intellectually honest. We don't have to make stuff up to make a point. Let's just we can say the truth about those things. It's obvious to everybody.
Yes.
So why pretend? Why make things up? We see when people are really dug in for one person or the other, they'll say anything. They will like just whitewash every bad thing that's ever happened, just to try and convince you that person is the greatest. And I really can't stand that, and just drives me crazy.
Yeah, and I think that is definitely one of the things. You also see these guys on the internet and that support one party or the other, one candidate or the other, that anything that even people on their own side that maybe they liked a couple of years ago, all of a sudden that person's running against their guy and that person's the worst person in the world. And it's like, no, guys, let's just be honest. We've got some really good people running for office and we're demonizing them, and it doesn't really help at all. It just hurts. And the dishonesty doesn't help either. You may win, but you don't win in the long run. And being dishonest is one of the things that frustrates me the most, is that, like, we can sit down and have an honest conversation. Yeah, Trump's a butthole. Absolutely. There's no denying that. Anybody that's had business dealings or watched him, absolutely. And his character is probably in question in a lot of ways. But on the other side, let's have an honest conversation about what would be best for us at this time. Yeah. And I don't think that we need to have these, whitewashed, oh, well, don't worry about that. He's obviously the greatest guy on the planet. And it's like, no, guys, he did good things for your side, for sure. I think that I agreed with some of the things he did. If you could have told me in 2015, when he came down that escalator, that he would be the president that was instrumental in overturning Roe v. Wade, I would have laughed in your face, because that's not who Donald Trump was. But yet, it happened. And it's like, wow. When that happened, I was like, holy cow. If you had that on your bingo card, you're a rich person.
Yeah, it was. I remember I was working midnights at the time in 2016, and the election was going on, and the results weren't in yet. And I had a weird shift. I can't remember. I had to get up at like 3 a.m. to go into work. It was a weird kind of half a shift or something. And I went to bed at like 10 or 11. They hadn't declared a winner yet, and woke up at 3 a.m. And my wife's got the TV on, and her eyes are kind of wide open. And I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, you're not going to believe what happened. Donald Trump just won. And as the president, it was like, what is going on? And the crazy thing is, when it comes to politics, one of the things that I've noticed that seems very obvious to me is the reactions that some of us have to the other side winning or losing. If I'm voting for a particular president and the other side wins, I'm not going to break down and just go in the fetal position and cry and I'll probably feel like, oh man, this sucks.
Yeah.
This is going to be a long 4 years, but it's not the end of the world. America, we always have this back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless of what's going on lately with politics, there's still a lot of back and forth, Republican, Democrat. Nobody's been in power for a super long time, in a real long time. And so, get over it. Your person lost. All right, let's see what happens in the next 4 years, and maybe something else will happen. It is not the end of the world like some people make it out to be. There's, we live in a big country, 50 states, all these local governments, and you think about, we got a pretty strong thing going here, regardless of how crazy things are.
Yeah.
America's pretty solid when it comes to the how it's built and the foundation and the network of everything that's connected. And just one election is not going to be the end of the world. So everybody calm down. Things will be all right one way or the other. But we can't be afraid to stand up and speak our minds. When it comes to a lot of these elections, you were talking about earlier about there are a lot of people that believe a certain way, but that don't necessarily vote perhaps the way they view things, like on a Christian worldview. There's a lot of people that are just lazy about voting. There's a lot of people in America that just don't get out and vote. And if we want things to change, people have got to get out and do that and stand up and take a stand. And otherwise, it might be the same old thing for the next 4 years or 8 years or however long it's going to be. So hopefully people aren't afraid to say what they believe. That's what we're trying to do in this format, is reach out to people and say what we believe is right and what we believe is true. And hopefully we'll motivate other people to want to take a stand also. And maybe we'll start to change some minds, not necessarily change minds, but just kind of get the tidal wave of support going in the direction we need it to, so people just aren't sitting on the sidelines anymore, and they realize, oh man, it's like the mob mentality almost. Like, I wasn't going to do anything, but these 5 people are going this way, so I guess I'll go this way. And it's not like we're whitewashing anything or tricking anybody. It's just when you realize when you're surrounded with like-minded people, you're much more motivated to get involved.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think that one of the things that we were talking about this before we went on the air, but I learned something today and looked it up, and I was blown away by it, because as Christians, we would think that it would just be automatic that we carry our worldview, the worldview of Christ, and comparing everything with the Word of God and lining that up with politics. The Bible never tells us not to be involved in politics. Not once. It never says that. And for us to shy away from that, I think that this started a few years ago, probably actually a couple of decades ago. And what happened was the church started to pull away from politics. Started saying, we don't really want to talk about that stuff. We want to be more broadly accepted in the community. So we're just not going to take these stands. So we pull away from politics. And then, ironically, everything starts to become political. It's almost like the enemies of our faith have said, "Oh, you're not going to you're not going to be involved in politics. You're not going to speak out about that." And I'm not saying that we should have political leaders in our pulpits. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that there are some specific things that are very clear cut in Scripture that we should say, yeah, that's our worldview. That's what we should be carrying. And as it stands right now, the latest research from Pew Research, which is one of the most reputable research companies or organizations in the world, is that the percentage of Christians that actually believe in a Christian worldview is 8%, which is, to me, that it was almost like my jaw dropped open when I saw that. I'm like, that's sad. And I think that's a direct result of people pulling out of politics and away from them and not really talking about any of those kind of things because they're messy. It is a messy thing, and it can get ugly, and it can get divisive. We should always carry love with us when we're talking about these things and not be that person that's, hammering the other person over the head. But I do believe that speaking truth in love is the way that we combat that. And it's not to shy away. It's to say, no, this is what the scripture says. This is what God says about these issues. And when we take that worldview, then we can change our culture. We can change our communities.
There's a real easy solution to avoid the sticky situations of politics and church and all that kind of stuff. Is this: just tell the truth. Mm-hmm. That's it. Mm-hmm. And if the God's honest truth offends somebody, that's on them. That's on the person being offended. Jesus said a lot of things, a lot of truth to a lot of people that didn't want to hear it. To the rich people of the world. Guess what? You're not getting into heaven.
Because you're so consumed with your money.
Because you care about your money more. Yep. That's the truth. Wow, that's pretty offensive to a lot of people.
Yep.
But he said it because it was true and people needed to hear it, and he didn't shy away from saying those very obvious things. So just, align yourself with biblically what's true. If you're a Christian out there and you believe in Jesus, you believe in Christianity, you believe that with all your heart, then try to align your political beliefs with that. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean you're always going to find the perfect born-again Christian that's running for president to vote for. News flash for you, that's probably not going to happen. There's some pretty close people to that, but that's not always going to be the case. So align the truth with your political beliefs as much as you possibly can. That's got to be a good place to start. And you have to be honest with yourself about that and what some politicians believe, and pray about it and go from there.
Yeah, I think that we could use an example from the early church of what happened in the early days of the church. There was a lot of persecution in Rome for years. And then all of a sudden, through the constant persistent faith of Christians, they got an emperor that became a Christian, Constantine. And all of a sudden, everything changed. And we had this massive explosion inside of the country that was persecuting the Christians at one point. And then all of a sudden, it becomes the beacon where Christianity is being shared with the world. So I would say that in our country, it's a little bit different than that. We don't have an emperor. As much as the media and a lot of talking heads want to put so much stock in a presidential election, I would say that because of the way we are structured, there's this thing called the power of the lesser magistrate. Our local sheriff has more jurisdiction in our county than the governor of this state does, actually. In other words, to impose laws, he has to get the sheriff on board with him for those kinds of things. That is the power of the lesser magistrate. So I would say, at very least, get involved in your local area. At very least, absolutely. Because that builds the groundwork to change culture, not in just your first in your county, and then your region, and then your state. And that's how change actually happens. It happens from the bottom up, from the grassroots, more than it does worrying about who the president is. Because the reality is, the guy down the road has more say over your everyday life than the guy in Washington, D.C. does.
Yeah, big time, no doubt about it. The other aspect about politics and kind of our Christian beliefs that is really big time in the news in the last couple of years is the whole social justice landscape of what's going on. And that's really a big one for me. So being in law enforcement for so long and being on the receiving end of the hate and the riots and all that kind of stuff, especially 2020 rolled around and George Floyd and all the riots that followed after that, all the social justice warriors really came out of the woodwork. And I would say most of the people that were supporting a lot of the social justice programs, I would say it's honest to say that most of those were probably liberal-leaning folks. Mm-hmm. And the people that were supporting the police in general were generally conservative folks. And that had a big time effect on a lot of people that were, in law enforcement in America. We all know that most cops out there are good people doing the job for the right reason. And when you see police stations getting burned to the ground, politicians trying to defund the police, it's still going on. New York City just had $150 million cut from its police budget. And you see things like that, and it's all politically driven based on theories that somebody's made up in a university somewhere about how they think things would work better if, the police weren't so involved. I'm here to tell you, if the police are the saviors of your community. They honest to God are. And God bless all the military folks that are out there overseas shooting terrorists and killing bad guys. God bless their souls. In the United States of America, there's one group of people keeping your town from burning down tonight. It's the police. And that's because, I'm going to say this. Most of the people in this country are not good people. There's a lot of really good people. Of the 330 million people in America, the majority of them are probably pretty decent people. There is such a huge amount of the population in this country that are criminals and that are out to get you. It is overwhelming, and you wouldn't understand it unless you've seen it for yourself. And I've seen it for 30 years in small rural America. I can't even imagine what it's like in L.A. or Oakland or Washington, D.C. or Chicago or all that. So when we talk about, well, you know what, we're going to take the side of the criminals because they've been, mistreated for so long. Not to say that they haven't, but when you take the side of criminals versus the side of the police, you better be careful about who you're, going to bed with here. You're really making a deal with the devil, because it's going to come back to get you. How many times have we seen politicians that try to, ban guns, ban whatever? The next thing you know, they're on the news because they got carjacked.
Literally happened
and
last
some
year. Politicians
that are trying to get rid of guns actually have guns illegally to protect themselves. Mm-hmm. I think this happened up in Chicago somewhere where a politician got carjacked and pulled a gun out, and they spent their whole life saying the guns are bad. So when you, as a law enforcement officer, personally seeing a lot of the social justice, hatred towards law enforcement, it's very misguided. It comes from a group of people that really don't really know what's going on. They don't know what real life is all about. If you make a decision to say, you know what, if somebody wants to go smash a window out of a store and steal thousands of dollars worth of stuff, and we're not even going to keep them in jail, they're coming back to your store the next night. Mm-hmm. It's going to happen. And so we know that keeping people like that in jail helps protect the community. And yeah, it's expensive to keep people in jail. It's very expensive to send people to prison. And it's crazy to think that we've got 700,000 or 800,000 people in prison in America. The reason that is because there's 700,000 or 800,000 people in America that have done some really horrible things, and they knew what the law was. They knew what the risk was before they committed the crime. They realized that, I could go do a home invasion. It's illegal. And I know if I get caught, I'm going to prison for 10 years, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's not our fault that 800,000 people are in prison in America. And, we could debate all the prison stuff all night long and rehab and whether it works or not, and whether people should be, we should be releasing. We should be releasing people. If you've been in prison for 50 years because you sold 3 ounces of crack cocaine to somebody, all right, we probably need to get this person out and get somebody else in there. Really needs to be in there.
Yeah.
I understand that. But on the small version of just the basic crime in your community, and like, what side are you on? Are you on the side of the criminal or on the side of police? And that's usually a political decision for a lot of people. And there's not, I would hope there's some middle ground there. Like, surely we could be, anti-crime and pro-police at the same time, but there's a lot of people that just pick a side.
Yeah.
Like, no, these people burned the town down. We're going to bond them out and make sure they get out of jail. And that works great until the person gets out of jail and kills one of your family members. Then you're like, well, what's it worth? We hear this phrase a lot. If it just saves one life, it's worth it. For gun control, if we can just save one life by banning all guns, it'd be worth it. Well, what if we could just save one life by keeping criminals in jail for a long time? Would that be worth it? Surely it would.
Yeah.
Surely it would. It's the same thing, right? So we need to be intellectually honest, and we see it on TV, especially with the social justice stuff. It's frustrating, and it has kind of driven home my beliefs, probably even more in the last couple of years, by people really deciding whose team do you want to be on. You want to be on the team of law and order and the police, or do you want to be on the team of criminals and
Anarchy.
Social justice? And the thing when it comes to social justice and our biblical beliefs, it seems like a lot of the social justice stuff is based on revenge. Like, you did this to us for so long, so now we're going to do this to you. And that's not biblical. The Bible says love keeps no record of wrongs. So are we just supposed to forget about what happened to us? Love keeps no record of wrongs. That's what the Bible says. So, are you supposed to just rip that page out of the Bible and throw it away and say, I'm going to get revenge on these people? You can think that way. Just don't call yourself a Christian.
Yeah.
Because that's not where that type of attitude comes from. And so, and so when we say base your politics on your religious beliefs, that's kind of part of what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you really going to adopt what the Bible and Jesus says into your Christian worldview? You really need to try and see if those align. Where none of us are perfect. We don't have it all figured out. We don't have it aligned up with everything in our lives totally. But we should have an open mind and let that drive us in that direction, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I amen and amen to that. I think that one of the things that I would say to further that point on social justice and social justice warriors, as we call them, is there are two different camps in that, I believe. I believe there are those that don't really know the ramifications of what they are actually trying to get across through their protests and whatever. And then there's another group, a smaller group, but they're usually in control, that actually know what they're trying to do. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to break apart a country that they don't agree with what it's based on. Because the reality is when you read the origins of the founding of the country, those men were flawed. We had slave owners that were in the founding, that were part of the founding fathers. But I will say this, when they sat down and they wrote those documents, they based them on Judeo-Christian values, on biblical principles. And the reason I think that is so hated is because it's counter to everything that everybody believes. We're in reality, this culture, and I think that this is another call for why the church should be getting involved, is because we're in a culture that is spiraling away from God and away from biblical principles. Benjamin Franklin said it best. This Constitution is meant for a moral and religious people. That's why it worked for so long. That's why we're seeing so many people say, it doesn't work now. It's bad. It's wrong. And what those people are rooted in is things that are proven to be failures. A lot of these people that are behind the scenes in these social justice groups are really, in fact, communists, and they believe in the communist ideas and ideals. And those things are proven failures. They're proven genocidal failures throughout history. And we can march through that and see how many millions of people have lost their lives from those things. But I do think that we're kind of, as you have said several times, I don't know that we're going to go back. But there is a way for us to go back. And that's if good and moral and believing people get involved in the way that they can, and they carry forth a Christian worldview to the world. Because if we're speaking the truth in the gospel and we are living that out, it's going to affect people. It's going to call people to repentance too, if we're doing it right. Not giving it platitudes or doing any of that kind of stuff. We are actually living that out on a daily basis. We are acting the way that we believe. That's going to carry forth, and people are going to be inspired by that, and we're going to change lives, and we're going to change our communities.
Here's the last little thing I'll say about kind of politics and kind of some of my observations on what's going on right now, especially with the big media outlets, CNN, Fox, ABC, whatever. You see a lot of political talk where people in the news were always making fun of everybody, whether it's, crazy Joe Biden or, Orange Man Trump or whatever. We're always calling everybody names. We're always making fun of people. And I think some of that comes from just some of that frustration we talk about. But let's just talk about the facts. Like if we want to talk about something in the news about the other candidate, then just talk about it. Talk about what their policy is, whether you think that's worked or not. When we kind of delve into the juvenile side of making fun and of everybody now, I'm all about comedy. I will, there's a place, a time and a place for comedy. Saturday Night Live, Babylon Bee, whatever. We can make fun of politicians, but as far as news organizations go, like let's just have the news. And I think it's why you see a lot of these kind of more middle of the road news organizations popping up all over the place, and there's a bunch of them going on right now. It's that's way outside the realm of the major outlets, because people are kind of tired of that too. Fox News, when they started, it was we're fair and balanced, or we report, you decide, and that was like refreshing, because all the other news you knew inherently was for one side. They would never admit it or say it, but you knew that was the case. And it was like, well, just come out and say it. So then you had Fox. It was like, we're just going to give you the news. Like, holy smokes. Well, now they're admittedly very conservative, and that's fine. And I've got no problem with that because they're very upfront about it. There's still a lot of other organizations that are still trying to hide the fact of what their political leanings are. And I wish they would just come out and say it too. Just go ahead and have your Democratic or liberal news outlet, which is CNN or MSNBC, and just say it. And Fox News is very conservative, and they can say it. And I don't think they shy away from saying it. I really wish they would all just stop with the juvenile and just kind of making fun of people a lot, because I think that kind of drags down kind of what we're trying to accomplish. If you're reporting the news from a conservative standpoint and you're wanting to convince people to come to your side, we got to be mature about it. You got to have, give people dignity, some respect, even if you don't think they deserve it. In my law enforcement career, the one thing that you could do to guarantee getting into a fight with some dude in the booking area of your police department was take their dignity away. Because a lot of people, that's all they got left. They don't have any money. They don't have a job. They got no place to live. And you start making fun of them, you could be in a serious, serious knockdown, drag out fight for your life, because they're done with it. And so you got to, if there's nothing else you leave with somebody, leave them with that. Yeah. Leave them with some dignity. So just be mature about it. Let's have a level of maturity if we're going to talk to each other, talk to somebody on TV about it, and maybe start from there. Yeah,
that is words of wisdom for sure. And I think as we close out, I think that what we could take away from this is that the most important thing for us as Christians is to carry Jesus with us everywhere we go, and to not forcefully, but I think that the word impose, it's not necessarily in a forceful context, but impose our Christian worldview wherever we go, and that could look like we're sharing the gospel with somebody, but it also could look like, hey, I did a little bit of research and I know that these candidates align closely with my worldview, so I'm going to vote for those people. And then I'm going to leave the rest to God. I'm going to say, God, I am going to vote for these people based off of the way I've educated myself, and I'm going to leave the rest to you, because I'll leave it with a Bible verse. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, turn from their wicked ways, and seek my face, I will hear from heaven, and I will heal their land. So if we want healing in this land, I think that the first thing that we have to do, we have to turn from our own sin. We have to turn from our own faults and failures. We have to seek God, and we have to carry that worldview. It's not just for on Sunday when we go into the church to act like a Christian. In fact, I would say that the other 6 days of the week are probably more important, because we're out in the world. We're out among people that don't believe, and we want them to see Jesus in us, because we know that the power of that changes lives. And I think that that is probably our commission as Christians in everything from the way we lead our families to the way that we vote should be aligned with God.
Yeah, represent yourself as a Christian in any of your conversations with people about politics or whatever the case is. When you leave that conversation, people should think that you're a pretty good dude and wonder why you are, that there's something going on there, and not that you are just dying to win the argument or to prove them wrong. You don't want to look like, there's a saying, I can't remember where it came from, but sometimes if you end up getting into a screaming argument with somebody and a third person walks in, they might not be able to tell who the fool is, because you've been drug into the middle of this thing, and you had good intentions at first, and now you're yelling and screaming at somebody. And when I was a cop, we'd have DUI arrests were always the ones where the arrestee really wanted to argue and yell and get in your face a lot. And I see a lot of cops these days that are trying to convince the DUI arrestee of why they got arrested, because it's always like, you ruined my life, I'm going to lose my job, I can't believe you did this to me. And they want to argue about why you're ruining their life. And I learned as a police officer that you just don't argue with those people.
Yeah.
It's like arguing with this mic stand. You could convince this more of how wrong it is than you could a drunk person that's getting arrested for DUI. So if you feel yourself getting into an argument and it's kind of the wheels are coming off, that's just probably time to step back and say, like, all right, man, good talking to you.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time, whatever. So
that's another biblical reference of casting pearls before swine. We don't want to argue with something that it's pointless to argue with certain people on certain subjects. Just know that, and you don't have to get involved in those things.
Represent yourself well and represent your faith well.
Yep. Well, man, it's been a great discussion tonight, and
no doubt.
I'm really, really enjoying where we're headed with this, and we would like to thank you guys once again for coming along for the journey with us. Real quick, we actually just got some new merch in just yesterday. We got some hoodies in. I posted on some of our social media. Hit up our website if you want to get any merch. I've had a lot of people buy some of our T-shirts. We've got hoodies now. We've sold a couple of them. And so we do have some limited quantities of that for the first run. And so if you want one for Christmas coming up, or you want to buy one for that special someone in your life that listens to the podcast, feel free to hit us up on the website. Check out all of our social medias. We're dropping content there all the time, and that's just going to continue to ramp up. We've got a lot of really cool things planned. We've got some guests coming in the next couple of months that are very, very, we're very excited about, to talk about some really specific subjects that we think you guys are going to enjoy. And but lastly, I would like to remind you guys that we are image bearers of Christ. As we go into the world, carry him with you and act like you believe. We'll see you guys next time.